state, because a lot of us are in these like high intellect situations where we're thinking all the time, we're planning all the time, we're always trying to think of, how can I become better? But when you kind of get to a more of a primal, simple-minded kind of state, and that's what I feel nature is. It's more of this primal state that you're able to really kind of be on a blank slate, and there's not really anything else to think about. There's not all these equations or like all of these complications. It's just, this is how it is, what are you gonna do with it?
Okay.
And so that's kind of how I see it, and that's how it really touches our spirits, our kind of like our internal feelings, is because naturally all of us are, we all have a simple mind at the base of our intellect, so to speak.
I think it kind of goes along with the notion of almost like a religious experience, but I don't know if I would call it religious so much as spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas instead of being this intellectual emphasis, it's more of this emotive, spiritual, this connection that it's really difficult, if not impossible, to explain linguistically. To be connected to something larger than yourself, I don't know how you can really explain that in a coherent way. It's this, but this is also similar to what Thoreau is getting at when he is discussing his discussing walking. Very first sentence on page 269. I wish to speak a word for nature, for absolute freedom and wildness, as contrasted with freedom and culture merely civil, to regard man as an inhabitant or a part and parcel of nature. So he's making this distinction between freedom and wildness. As contrasted with, freedom and culture, yes, merely civil. We understand as civil or political. So these are two different types of freedom here. Let's start with the easier one. What would freedom and culture, or civil or political freedom and culture be?
Free speech.
Free speech, okay.
Self-expression.
Okay. Oh.
Just human rights.
At least in the United States, the notion of freedom is important. So we should all know what it is. What is it?
Freedom and culture together, or just freedom?
Well, looking at freedom, civil political freedom, and culture. And we'll look at freedom and wildness later.
I mean, for a lot of it, it's just being able to do what one would like to do, kind of, you're not held down by anything, it's just, you're kind of free to act in a way that you feel that you wanna act.
Okay. Autonomy.
You're not held down by some other person or some
Okay.
political stance or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, yes.
I don't know if you technically consider this like what do you consider this, but like consumerism, just we're free to buy whatever we want. As long as, but we're also free to work to earn it. It was the thought going through my brain and I was trying to deconstruct my thought and my hand raised before I did it.
No worries. I'm gonna let that marinate for a little minute.
It was one of those, like, I had a thought and then I was like, wait.
I understand. Okay, I'm gonna critique these. I'm gonna say that freedom and wildness is distinct from freedom and culture. So, we are, oh, sorry, bless you. We are remarkably constrained in our culture. We are not as free as we would like to think that we are. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But in wildness, when you are out in nature, you have complete freedom to behave and act however you want to act. If you want to strip down naked and go running through a field, that is perfectly fine in wilderness. If I wanted to strip down naked and go running through, where is it? The track and field here, that would not be allowed. That would be frowned upon. The idea that we have autonomy, I think is true to a degree, but we are still constrained by what we are required to do in order to survive and live. In our culture, it is considered a requirement that everybody work. It's considered to be that if someone does not work, then they are not deserving of food and shelter and healthcare. We have in wildness is complete freedom to be what we want to be. We are not constrained by tradition, by history, by any of that. We can do whatever we want to do. And we don't have to answer to cultural expectations of who we ought to be and the way in which we ought to behave. you as an individual are expected to behave in certain ways. Especially in customer service positions. You have a job in customer service. You're expected to behave in particular ways. You're expected to behave in particular ways in this classroom. There are certain things that are required of you because you are living in this culture. You are required to do things to make this society still function. And this is, when I first read this section, I intentionally began sauntering as much as I possibly could, because I just love the idea of sauntering. So I'm going to have to just read this to you. I have met with but one or two persons in the course of my life who understood the art of walking, that is, of taking walks, who had a genius, so to speak, for sauntering, which word is beautifully derived from idle people who roved about the country in the Middle Ages and asked charity under pretense of going à la Saintière, to the Holy Land, till the children exclaimed, "There goes a saunterer, a holy lander." They who never go to the Holy Land in their walks, as they pretend, are indeed mere idlers and vagabonds. But those who do go there are saunterers in the good sense, such as I mean. Some, however, would derive the words from saintière, without land or home, which therefore, in the good sense, will mean having no particular home, but equally at home everywhere. For this is the secret to successful sauntering. He who sits still in a house all the time may be the greatest vagrant of all, but the saunterer, in the good sense, is no more vagrant than the meandering river. If you are ready to leave father and mother and brother and sister and wife and child and friends and never see them again, if you have paid your debts and made your will and settled all your affairs and are a free man, then you are ready for a walk. The reasons that we discussed going for a walk, going for hiking, are all of these reasons that he's discussing here. If you are ready to leave father and mother, brother and sister, wife and child and friends, and never see them again, if you've paid your debts and made your will and settled all your affairs and are a free man, then you are ready for a walk. Escaping all of those things that cause us problems, that cause us stress, if we are able to escape those, to put those to one side and focus on the present moment, focus on where we are, who we are, what we are doing, and looking at the world as it is, and really being fully present in the moment, then you are ready for a walk. A true walk, going for a hike, you need to be able to do that. If you are spending the entire hike worrying about your taxes or about your partner who just broke up with you or whatever, you are not fully present in the moment, and you cannot truly enjoy the hike. You are distracted. As he says later on, no wealth can buy the requisite leisure, freedom, and independence which are capital in this profession. It comes only by the grace of God. It requires a direct dispensation from heaven to become a walker. Yet I think Thoreau would argue that that dispensation from heaven can be readily achieved through voluntary simplicity, through reducing our concerns, reducing our worries and commitments such that we can experience this type of freedom. We have the freedom to be who we want and do what we want. How often do y'all go for hikes?
Pretty often.
How often is pretty often? Is it daily?
It's daily,
Daily or every other day? Okay. And how often do you go? How long are you usually out?
How much homework do I have that day?
2 hours.
45 minutes? How long?
Said how much homework do I have that day?
Anywhere, but yeah, anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours.
Okay. Thoreau says that he needs to walk in the woods for a minimum of 4 hours every single day. That if he does not practice this every day for 4 hours, walking through the woods, that he is harming himself. Says, at times, however, he may have walked a mile into the woods bodily without getting there in spirit. What is he talking about there?
He wasn't present.
Okay,
Just walking.
you're just walking through.
Just warming up.
How would your life be if you followed Thoreau's example and spent 4 hours a day, at least, walking through the woods?
Probably get lost.
It would be so much better.
It would be so much better.
But my professors wouldn't like me as much.
Maybe, but which is more important? Your professors liking you or walking for 4 hours a day in the forest?
I totally agree, but the university will not give me a degree by denying my homework. Although, as much as I've tried to argue that these walks should be equally supplementary for homework, they just don't agree.
That is so weird.
I know.
That is so weird.
Not all classes give hugging trees as an assignment.
They don't?
And that's actually kind of why. I have 2 classes.
I often wonder what your other classes are like.
Well, my environmental management class, we just went to Capitol Reef and we were looking at these cool structures that are rocks. But like we all went and hugged and kissed them. Well, at least me and my professor both did, and I know one other person. And so it's like,
Kiss rocks.
yeah, we were hugging and kissing rocks all weekend, and it was wonderful. And so that was like a big part of our class was this trip. So I think that hugging trees is It's common in my semester.
Okay, well, that's good. That is good. I am happy to hear that. This is, right, this is exactly what I was talking about. This is the second paragraph on page 270. I think that I cannot preserve my health and spirits unless I spend 4 hours a day at least, and it is commonly more than that, sauntering through the woods, over the hills and fields, absolutely free from all worldly engagements. But sometimes I am reminded that the mechanics and shopkeepers stay in their shops not only all the forenoon, but all the afternoon too, sitting with crossed legs, so many of them, as if the legs were made to sit upon and not to stand or walk. I think that they deserve some credit for not having all committed suicide long ago. Connecting with the non-human world is such an integral part of making us better humans. And I'm not talking better humans in a moral sense, but better in that we are healthier, more awake, more alive, intellectually, emotionally, physically. We are becoming better versions of ourselves. Many people, especially now, instead of going into the woods or going into the mountains themselves, go to great lengths to, as Thoreau describes it, import the woods to them. What is that? Importing the woods. Do any of you have house plants?
Not anymore. That's sad. My cat killed my cactus.
I don't have the time to take care of them. They die.
That's why you buy a succulent. They can only water them once a
Still-
week.
Could still die.
Oh my god, I got my mom a succulent for Mother's Day, and she thought it was, well, she had been watering it, but then she's like, is this a fake plant? And like, this was like months and months and months later, and I was like, maybe, like, I don't know, and so I like looked at it, and I was like, yeah, I think it is fake. And then like 2 months later, I looked at it again, and I was like, no, this is real. But it's like the amount of time spent like not knowing if this is a fake or real plant, and like not watering it, actually watering it, and it's like fully still alive. Succulents are crazy. That's just my sense. Sorry.
No, thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. I drive by this house that has a raised bed, 2 raised beds, and both of them are completely filled with plastic plants. It's hilarious. I don't know why you would construct raised beds and plant them with plastic plants, but people around where I live are odd. Think of people's backyards that they have. They engage in so much work, in so much effort, trying to bring wilderness or the forest or the mountains to them, bring nature to them, instead of going out into the non-human world themselves. They spend thousands of dollars making sure that they have all of the correct trees and they're all healthy and well watered and all of this, when they could just walk outside their front door and go for a hike. Now, Thoreau wrote this walking in about 1860. He says that the majority of man's improvements are merely cutting down forests, defacing the land, making it bold before its time. He says, nowadays almost all man's improvements, so-called, is the building of houses and the cutting down of the forest and of all large trees, simply deform the landscape and make it more and more tame and cheap. Like I said, this was written in 1862. Over 160 years have passed since this was written. Have we changed? You say no, Risa?
Well, in some ways, yes, but yeah, not totally. And we still build buildings and mow down forests and call it, progress.
Progress?
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, I encourage interrupting me.
How I look at it is like different but not separate. Like we're like physically our methods have changed, but our actions have.
Okay.
Like we're still, chopping down trees, we're still planting trees, we're still polluting lakes and rivers, we're still, sending fumes into the air. We're still infesting our water supply with drugs and other unwanted substances. We're still just creating areas rampant for the breeding and spreading of disease and death. We're still killing wild animals at a rate that is ludicrous.
I mean, going along that, I had when I was an undergrad, a professor said that they tested the pollutants in the Rio Grande River and said that one of the pollutants that was the highest in the Rio Grande was Prozac. It's like, there are some really mellow fish in the Rio Grande right now. I mean, we are doing all sorts of things to, as Thoreau says, cheapen and tame the environment. So if we know what the problem is, how do we fix it? I mean, what? Yes, Avery?
Oh, well, I guess I was just thinking, like, I'm also writing a research paper for my other class, and it's on, like, women's health and such. And it seems like we're kind of so busy on arguing about, like, what to do, that we don't do anything.
I know!
We just can't decide on anything. Like, that's the problem.
Exactly. We identify the problem, but then we just discuss the problem. We don't actually look for solutions. So we need to move, we need to make that second step. So what is the second step? How do we move forward?
Kill all the bureaucrats.
Bureaucrats? So, complete political revolution.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll throw it up here.
Other simple solution is bring movement to people.
Although with revolution though, I would say that you also have to have a vision of what you want after the revolution. Has any of you ever seen the movie V for Vendetta?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was great. You know, they have this wonderful revolution, but then at the end it's, so now what? You know, what do you do now? So that's what I want to discuss. What do we do now? We've had our revolution. What is the next step?
You have to change the demand.
Demand for what?
We're a very consumer society.
Okay.
Like, we take resources from all around the world and use people from all around the world just so we can have chairs and desks and all that. So if we change the demand, and people don't really want that in the US, then
I mean, I think most people still want chairs. Well, I'm looking at specific, you're speaking very theoretically, which is fine, but I want specifics. I'm like, so how do we do this?
There's one thought is redefine the cultural definition of happiness.
Okay.
So it's not, back to the consumerism, it's not you're happy if you have all these things. It's you're happy if you do things, if you're with people, if you're enjoying what we are destroying, and so we have encouragement to not destroy it.
Okay. Sorry, I had a side, I want to hear what you have to say. I just have a question for all of you because it popped in my head. You know that song, If You're Happy and You Know It, Clap Your Hands?
Mm-hmm.
Did that confuse any of you when you were little? Like, I would just stand there, because I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I don't know, am I happy? If I am happy, do I know it? What is happiness? And so I would just stand there in fear, because I didn't want to be lying, that would be bad if I was lying. And so I just kind of, but no one else just has this problem.
I got taken to this school counselor in like 4th grade because if you're happy, clap your hands, and I didn't clap, and then my teacher was like, aren't you happy? And I'm like, no.
Not particularly.
And then I had to go talk to the counselor and explain to him why I wasn't happy.
Okay, see, at least one other person was confused. Okay, sorry, Griffin. Didn't mean to take your thunder, steal your thunder there.
Okay,
How do we fix this?
kind of tying in with revolution, like, I know a lot of the, European countries, they have way more support for third parties in elections, and those
okay.
are typically green groups. So I think if we're able to establish a better representation of the people within the country, and because obviously the two-party system here, it works for now, but it's not amazing representation of everyone. So maybe the establishment of a new, better, higher third party, or such, anything else like that.
Instant runoff voting. Okay. So, do away with the electoral college is one thing that I'm hearing you implicitly saying. And instant runoff voting. Y'all know what instant runoff voting is? It's where you can rank your candidates.
Oh, ranked choice.
Oh, yeah, ranked choice voting.
Okay.
Yeah.
I support.
It seems that both of these could be a way of getting the voice of the people more accurately represented. So we can, I'm not just saying this to, think about that, how interesting. These are things that we can actually fight for. We can actually make known. We can contact our elected officials and tell them that this is how we want elections run. I know that in Salt Lake, at least, a lot of local elections are instant runoff voting, like for the mayor. So I can pick who I want, and then my second choice, my third choice, and fourth choice. Yes.
So I know this is bad because I've already given two answers. What was the question again?
What, so, no worries, just, what promoted this? Says is nowadays, almost all man's improvements, so-called as the building of houses and the cutting down of the forests and of all large trees, simply deform the landscape and make it more tame and cheap. We seem to all agree that this is still the case. Over 160 years later, this is still the case. So we're trying to figure out what we can do to change that. Presumably, we all agree that this is an issue, that this is a problem. We wouldn't be in this class if we didn't think that the non-human world, the environment, was important and worth protecting. So how do we go about making it such that we can move forward? We've identified the problem. What is the solution? Long answer to your question.
Yeah, no, I was following a train of thought and then I forgot where the start was, and it just happens more often than I care.
I really think the only viable way is like a top-down approach. I think that we need to just implement laws that actually protect the environment instead of, because a lot of the times they'll have like
Okay.
manufacturing processes where they'll destroy the environment. But it's really just kind of like the cost of doing business.
Again, with this would require elected officials being willing to enact this legislation, which seems to be a problem for a lot of our elected officials currently.
I think another problem that we need to fix is everyone having a different mindset. Because, for example, this legislation, there's a land in Utah called Bears Ears Monument, that was basically made by the Obama administration. They made it into a monument, but then later the people got frustrated because they thought it was the government overreaching their land, because it's more of, Bears Ears is this Native American monument essentially for Navajos, Utes, and there's a lot of archaeology, pottery and stuff like that. And a lot of the locals thought that the monument was a overstepping of government, and they said, leave it to us, we'll protect our own land. And so there's a lot of problems right now because a lot of people have different ideas. And it's kind of like we need to be all on the same page and consolidating these ideas into actionable items, because even down there in a little local place that only has maybe 16,000 people can't even agree.
Right.
Even the locals are fighting amongst themselves. So some of them want the legislation to take place and say, hey, yeah, help us protect it, because they don't want people coming in, they don't want miners coming in, oil companies, all this stuff. But then you have the others that are like, no, we can do it ourselves. We don't need anyone else. Let's do it ourselves. So it's
And there's also the argument that I've heard that actually isn't Utah land, that's federal land.
yeah. Well, it's publicly owned land.
Publicly owned land, so it's owned just as much by people who live near that monument as people who are in
Yeah. So
West Virginia.
That's the biggest problem, is because, this idea of ownership is a big, huge problem when it comes to this whole preserving and protecting, and because who does really own it? Who's responsible for its caretaking?
These are great questions. Yes.
So it's kind of on the thought of ownership, it's not a flawless solution, but transferring the ownership from the federal government or the city government or whatever, transferring the ownership of the land itself equally to the people.
I think that's idea right now is that it is owned by people, but the government, the federal government, is a way of managing it for the people's interest.
Yeah,
You know, like, you need some sort of organization in order
Yeah.
to do
But-
this.
But my thought is basically where, you know, if the public land, if it is owned by the public, every individual, no matter age, race, whatever, you know, is an equal share of this land, thus has equal rights to access the land. It also means that people will probably look at people destroying said land and see it kind of as a personal attack and be more willing to rectify or defend their land, if you get what I'm trying to say.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah, but the idea behind that is not everyone's going to agree at the same time. That's also the other big thing, is because the reason, like, for Bears Ear specifically, like my example, the locals wanted the government to strong arm businesses. Like, that's basically why they wanted the government to take control. But then other people say, well, we're not even worried about that because it's never been a problem. And so it's like, and then it's like, okay, well, what if a big person just comes in and says, hey, here's $10 million. Well, now you just influence like a bunch of publicly, and they're like, I don't really care about the land anymore. Like, there's all that ownership and money, like, we almost have to get rid of money to like,
Which is not going to happen.
which is never going to happen.
No.
It's like,
We're too
that's,
far
but
gone.
like, I mean, that's the problem nowadays, is because we're so driven by greed, we're so driven by this idea of ownership, we're so driven by all of these like consumerism and, you know, your status quo, and it's really gonna be hard, like, if a revolution even was to happen, like, I don't think people would know what to do,
Mhm.
because they would basically topple something that's been around for so long, but then it's like, okay, you got your victory.
What do you do now?
What are you gonna do to fix it? There's so much damage.
Yeah.
Where do you start? So,
Okay, so this is, I want to get you thinking about this, trying to figure out ways that you can actually engage in the necessary work to make the changes that need to happen. I'm gonna kind of go in a different direction now. Says, top of page 273, that very first paragraph, full paragraph. Says, the West of which I speak is but another name for the wild. And what I have been preparing to say is that in wildness is the preservation of the world. Every tree sends its fibers forth in search of the wild. The cities import it at any price. Men plow and sail for it. You'll recall when a while ago when we were looking at Gary Snyder, and I mentioned that quote, in wildness is the preservation of the world. Gary Snyder was looking at definitions of wildness and was making the argument that wild in contemporary parlance is typically aligned with negative ideas, like your wild nature is untamed, uncivilized, is something that's bad, that needs to be controlled. But what Thoreau is arguing is that in wildness is the preservation of the world. Looking back at what I just barely erased, the notion of freedom and wildness. Not being constrained. The West of which he is speaking of. Think again, this was written in 1862. When was it that, oh yeah, the Mormons came here, what, 1847, is that right? Something like that, okay. the West was very much undeveloped. There was wild, empty space. This is what Thoreau is talking about. Going west allows you to embrace wildness, to not be constrained. It says that life consists with wildness. The most alive is the wildest. Not yet subdued to man, its presence refreshes him. One who's pressed forward incessantly and never arrested from his labors, who grew fast and made infinite demands on life, would always find himself in a new country of wilderness, surrounded by the raw material of life. Goes on to discuss that this dedication to tradition, to history, to culture is preventing us from growing. When he was writing, European literature was understood to be paramount type of literature. That was what everyone should read. And he is saying that here in America, the earth is still raw and we can create new ideas, new genres. We can do wonderful new things that have never been conceived of before. Instead of adhering to culture, we can embrace in wildness. We can go in new directions. As he says, in East is Europe, tradition, conformity. You know, it was once fertile ground when it was new and just emerging. Think of the works by Ovid or Homer or Virgil. These were powerful new works of art. But that land has been so worked over, those routes of thought have become so enmeshed that new ideas cannot emerge. The West is America. It is a land waiting to be discovered and understood. You know, it is fresh, it is new, it is exciting. We can do whatever we want, we can create whatever our vision is. That is, I feel, especially true for people in college. All of you can bring forth new ideas. You can all create a vision of what you want to see in the world, and you can make that a reality. Says that sometimes, no doubt, we find it difficult to choose our direction because it does not yet exist distinctly in our minds. And this echoes something that he writes in Walden. He says, "Why are we in such desperate haste to succeed, and in such desperate enterprises? If a man does not keep pace with his companions, perhaps it is because he hears a different drummer. Let him step to the music which he hears, however measured or far away. It is not important that he should mature as soon as an apple tree or an oak. Shall he turn spring into summer? If the condition of things which we were made for is not yet, what were any reality which we can substitute?" This is the notion that I have discussed previously. The distinction between a career and a calling. If the things for which, if your vision, if your dream, if the time is not right for it, you should not be forced to give up on your dreams, on what you are passionate about. You should find your calling first and then make your career. In our society, it seems that this is emphasized and this is completely ignored. It's something that we need to figure out. What were you made for? What is your calling, your purpose? Okay, so
Cheese.
cheese.
Queso.
Okay, so that's good. Thank you. Flip back to 273. That first full paragraph. If I were to, I don't know, ask the question, what does this phrase mean? In wildness is the preservation of the world. How would you respond?
We can't survive without the wild parts of our world and ourselves.
Okay, okay.
I think modern man disrupts wilderness.
Okay.
I think we seek a lot of control, and that control causes a lot of destruction, so if we try to lessen back on our control of
Okay.
each other and the environment, it will thrive.
Think of what he was saying about, on 274, yes, 274. There's, that second full paragraph. In literature, it is only the wild that attracts us. Dullness is another name for tameness. It is the uncivilized, free, and wild thinking in Hamlet and the Iliad, in all the scriptures and mythologies not learned in the schools, that delights us. A truly good book is something as natural and as unexpectedly and unaccountably fair and perfect as a wild flower discovered on the prairies of the West. Genius is a light which makes the darkness visible like the lightning's flash, which perchance shatters the temple of knowledge itself. Wildness is this true nature, who we are as individuals, as humans. We've spoken about what a human is, what a person is. I know those are two distinct things, but what a human is and how we have these unique capacities and capabilities, the attempts to control them and rein them in are destructive. We need wildness in ourselves, in our thinking, in our cultures. We need to be who we are unrestrained. I get so excited talking about Thoreau. It's just so cool. Any final thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, haikus? Griffin gave us a great haiku once, and that was the only haiku.
Someone whip out another. It's
I
not
know.
hard.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. Have a delightful weekend. Go out trick-or-treating tonight or do whatever. And I'll see you on Thursday.